All right, so now a word about tanking. When it comes to tanking, as far as raid bosses are concerned, there's only a few of them that actually have a tanking mechanic based on toughness. The rest of them is based on a specific mechanic, like picking up a specific item. For example, if you're looking at Soulless Horror, that fight is based on two tanks picking up two different items that cause you to aggro, and you have to use a special action key in order to draw her attention to you. So the bosses that actually have a tanking mechanic that is based on toughness is Veil Guardian, Gorseval, Keep Construct, Zera, Deimos, Doom, Twin Largos, Cardinal Sabir, Cardinal Adina. All the other bosses are based on a specific mechanic. For example, Kadim the Peerless is based on you activating a channel skill and being the closest person to him. Other bosses also have another mechanic that is the closest person to them. For example, in Kadim 1.0, that's how you aggro the legendary creatures. The closest person to their hitbox is the one that obtains the aggro. So why this is important, whenever you're tanking, you also want to try to move him to position the boss into a specific location. If you look at Keep Construct, you want to try to move him to one side of the arena so you can try to kill the phantasms easier when it comes to cleaving, etc. And we showed a couple examples with Veil Guardian. Now, the popular classes that you can use for tanking, there's no surprise there. They're the classes that have either easier access to toughness, so their gear is actually easier to acquire and actually has an effect for them. Or scales off their other traits. For example, if you have a Heal Firebrand build on Snow Crows, they recommend the Harriers, and you have Superior Rune of the Monk, and everything here is all based for healing. But Firebrand is also an excellent tank. He meets a couple of the criteria. So he has a lot of blocks. So if you look at the blocking skills that you have, the Firebrand is listed for quite a few of them. Protective Strike, Shield of Wrath. You also have an Invulnerability healing skill, though normally it's not brought with Firebrand, but the Firebrand does have a lot of other ones that grant Aegis. Aegis, as you know, also gives you another block. You can also block your projectiles, so the Guardian makes an excellent tank, which would make sense based on his traits. The Guardian is also very self-sufficient, so if he builds a tanking gear, and for example, let's say he uses a Minstrels or a Giver set, which gives him healing power, vitality, and toughness, he is going to be a very effective tank. Now, there's only a couple of things where it's going to be a problem when it comes to tanking on your Firebrand. Now, when you're looking at the Firebrand, all of his skills, that, like for example, is also responsible for quickness. If you look at Mantra of Lore or Mantra of Potence, it's going to be a 180 radius, and it's got 450 radius that applies quickness in front of him. He's also responsible for maintaining the quickness. If you remember from the previous discussion, we were looking at for the combat replay. And if you're taking a look at your Firebrand and you take a look at his radius, and keep in mind those indicators, 180 is the radius where he's going to be applying quickness around him, but 450, so it's a little bit less than the 480, we'll just use that one for reference. He is going to apply quickness if he's facing that direction. So if you see a little arrow, anybody in front of him when he discharges his quickness is going to get the effects of his quickness, right? Same thing with the Chronomancer we talked about earlier, has a 250 radius when it comes to tanking. He needs to keep those things in mind. But a Firebrand makes an excellent tank. The problem, in my opinion, when it comes to that, is that a lot of his blocks are through Aegis. If you take a look at these, the Protective Strike will block the next hit, but then it ends. Your Shield of Wrath will block up to 3 hits, but it's usually not brought because it's usually a focus skill. It's usually a more aggressive stance. He doesn't have a lot of stance skills, like the Chronomancer, for example, when he's using your Deja Vu or Echo of Memory. These skills are blocking stances, and you can actually see they actually last a certain amount of time. So while you're activating this, you block all incoming attacks for a short duration. It doesn't matter how many attacks you have, so it doesn't actually end as soon as you take the first hit. Unlike the Firebrand, as soon as he takes the Protector Strike, it's the next incoming attack, one singular, and then it will grant boons to the allies. So this is going to come into play with specific bosses, somewhat more so than others. For some bosses, it's not going to be a problem. Other bosses are going to cause you an issue. So, for example, if you take on Veil Guardian, no problem. You can block individual hits, you can block the blues, prevent yourself from getting teleported. He's a very effective tank for Veil Guardian. Also, since he's backed up against the wall, it's really easy for him to just blast everyone in front of him with quickness. So a Healbrand is an excellent tank when it comes to Veil Guardian. Gorseval, a little less. You're going to be facing your group, so you're going to be discharging your quickness in front of them, and you do have all of your blocks and your stability. However, the type of damage that you want to try to mitigate, it's not as effective when it comes to as a healer as, for example, Heal Necker. Heal Necker puts down his barriers, and lifesteal lets you get through your retaliation phase a little bit easier, but he is still effective. But you'll start to struggle on some bosses. Example is going to be Deimos. I never bring a Firebrand tank here. Reason why is that if you're relying on Aegis in order to block the next hit that comes in, and this specifically Mind Crush, which will instantly kill you if you don't have a block up, it's an unreliable block. The reason why is that there's Prides and Greeds that are going to be moving towards our Sol D'Alessio and exploding. And whenever they do explode, they have the chance to get rid of your Aegis. You're also getting pelted from a distance from with these projectiles. Right after you deal with your Mind Crush, you also have to basically heal up. You got to spike heal yourself as much as possible because you get a debuff. So in this case, the Firebrand is actually better than the Chronomancer because he is able to heal himself right back up very quickly while still providing support to his allies. But the Aegis block, I've seen many, many times people get knocked off. They stand too close to the hitbox. The Aegis only blocks one hit from the pizza slice and not all of them, which will instantly launch the tank off the side. So it's not always the most reliable block. A Chronomancer does better when it comes to blocking those because he has blocking stances. But the Chronomancer, if you're looking at the builds that they recommend for a Chronomancer, they're a little bit more aggressive, but you could run, for example, a Power Chronomancer, and you could, instead of using Berserkers, you could run full Minstrels, and you could run a Scepter to give tons of clones and tons of healing, as well as here they have the Inspiration trait line, is the other option that you have. You have lots of healing available if you have healing stats. Without the healing stats that you're going to get from the Inspiration Chronomancer, without those stats, he's going to die, and he's going to die very quickly. The Chronomancer requires support, especially in fights like Deimos and Soulless Horror. He's an excellent tank. He's an effective tank, but he does need support. He needs the Druid healing. He needs the Druid cleanses, and he has a lot of invulnerability with Druid Distortion. He's got a ton of blocks that comes blocking stances to block long attacks, like in Kadim the Peerless, where he launches a barrage of projectiles and not just one or two. He's an excellent tank, but he does have those problems. Whenever he's also applying quickness from Seize the Moment, which is one of the traits that they have you run, remember that that's still a 240 radius. So if you're looking at the smaller circle, everyone inside this circle is 240. Those are the guys that are going to get your quickness. If you're the Chronomancer, in this case the Chronomancer is doing the tanking for this fight, you watch how that plays out. Look at where the Chronomancer is standing in relation to the boss, because Gorseville is a fairly thick boy. And as he's hitting him, if you notice, no one is in range of Seize the Moment. No one. Now, if your primary source of quickness in this fight is actually not coming from Seize the Moment, but rather in this case he was running an old school Inspiration trait line, he put his wells down on the group. But this is where it can be a little problematic. You're struggling to do your job, which is tanking Gorseville where he needs to be standing. However, you notice that everyone's not standing close enough, and it's not even their fault. Everyone is standing directly on Gorseville's ass where they should be, but they're not getting the effects. And it's just the way the mechanic works. Gorseville is fairly thick. That's one of the disadvantages you have. The Firebrand will not have those challenges. The Firebrand is facing, and he has a 480 radius indicator, so he can give everybody quickness from there. That's why the Firebrand would be superior. So start keeping these things in mind when you're looking at specific bosses and how you apply your buffs. So the most popular tanks you have Chronomancer and Firebrand. In this case, it's going to be a tank brand. There's a couple of other options because technically you can tank on anything. If you take a look at the benchmarks that they have on Snowcrows, a lot of the times they'll have it listed as a heal tank, and usually it's going to be doing a Druid. Well, a Druid is also an excellent tank. A Druid, all of his spirits have a really good range. He can tank, no problem. You can tank heal Kite on a Druid. You can hand kite on all kinds of things because they have their greatsword. They can switch their greatsword, and they have their greatsword blocking stance. If you look at this one, is listed. All the rangers have access to this skill, your counterattack. It's a blocking stance. It blocks all incoming attacks. It's 5 seconds duration. That's insane. So a Druid is a very effective tank as well. But usually the Druid is focused on trying to heal. He's trying to focus on giving might to the group. And if you look at the radius that you have for your Celestial Avatar skills, take a look at these. Your Rejuvenating Tides. Take a look at the range for these things. A 240 radius. Again, if this was a Druid who was trying to tank and he's trying to give his team might, he's only going to be using his range skills, and you have to spam those versus the channel that heals everybody up and does more skills, more healing power. So there's a challenge to everyone when it comes to tanking. But here's where I'm going to definitely infuse my own opinion. I like to tank on a Herald. And the reason why I like tanking on a Herald or an Alacrigade at some points is because the Alacrigade skills we were talking about when it comes to the radius, an Alacrigade has a radius for Alacrity of 360. Everyone's inside it, even on thick boys like Gorseville. But there's one that's even better. So the Alacragade is also a pretty effective tank, but he loses, I would say, a little bit of damage if he's trying to go heal Alacragade. If he's trying to go like a DPS version of Alacragade, then that would be fine, and he doesn't have to change very much in order to be the highest toughness. Usually, since you have a Soul Beast in your group, a Soul Beast is, whenever he merges with his pet, is going to have an extra 150 toughness. So at a minimum, you should always be above 1,150 toughness if you want to try to be a tank in any one of these encounters. This is where I would say that the Herald is actually a better option, and which is why I prefer tanking on your Herald. If you take a look at the Snow Crows, they actually have a build for Boon Herald. The Boon Herald is all DPS for the most part. You can usually average about 28k. Realistically, you do about 24 or so. But he has a lot of advantages. One of them is he gives permanent protection, fury, swiftness. He even gives might. Now, not 25 stacks of might, but he does give about 14. But the main thing is here. This facet of nature gives everyone in your squad an extra 20% boon duration. This class also is an excellent, I guess you could say, he's a life stealer. This guy just automatically auto attacks through his swords. And then if you look at this trait for Rolling Mists, sorry, this one here, Dance of Death, this is what you should run. If you are auto-attacking with your swords, you are applying vulnerability. Because you applied vulnerability, you applied a stack of battle scars. Because you applied a stack of battle scars, you now lifesteal. This is a permanent effect. As long as you are auto-attacking, you are healing. And if you are less than 50% of your hit points, which is higher because you're using Draconic Fortitude, which gives you additional health, right here, 10%. So every time you auto-attack, you're getting lifesteal. You're just auto-attack, you're a little leech, you're a little Death Knight. But you're also providing buffs to all of your allies. And the nice thing about the Herald is that his buffs are 600 range. So when you look at your facets, these are all the facets that you're maintaining in Draconic Echo, which provides the buffs to additional 5 targets. So all 10 people in your party, every single one of these is a 600 radius. This is important. If you mouse over, assuming that this was the Herald that was tanking in this particular fight, compare the 600 radius to all the other radiuses. Everyone inside this circle, which is massive, is going to be getting the buffs that the Herald is putting out. The Herald can also, he's not terrible. If you take a look at this, this is what I was running on this rotation. I was running this gear. So if you look here, the Herald is running basically all Berserkers, but the difference is he has a bunch of Knights trinkets. And then here he's got Cavaliers. His stats are a little bit lower than if he was running full Berserkers. But if you adjust and you add the Fury and you actually add the effects of the banners, which, let's be honest, everyone's going to have, he's almost 100% critical strike chance. This can still do a consistent amount of damage. He can be classed as one of the DPS players. He may not be as high as everyone else. He's definitely dragging the bottom, but compare that to our current tank. He is doing more. So he is a more effective tank because he is doing more damage while also being able to provide his passive buffs to his allies. Also, this Chronomancer is gimping himself in order to tank here. He is losing an incredible amount of damage because he's not running the traditional build. If you looked at the other run that I showed for Veil Guardian, a Chronomancer with Seize the Moment that they show on the Snow Crows has an incredible potential for damage that he is losing. We're all losing out on as a team. We're losing out on his damage by not having him right next to the group. Take a look at this. 32k. Chronomancers have an incredible potential for damage, but they don't have the ease of maintaining all the boons. And then they also, the thing with the Herald is that they actually have excellent blocking stances. So if you look at their Warding Rift from your Staff 3, that's a blocking stance. You can move while using it, and it blocks everything. Your Shield, Crystal Hibernation, not only blocks everything for 4 seconds, it heals you for every incoming attack. That's every incoming attack. Veil Guardian Greens, you can use it to block your Deimos Mind Crush. Anything that comes in, this is just a channel, and it will block everything, and it will just straight up heal you. Your healing skill, when it comes to your Herald, your Infused Light, so passively when you activate this trait, it's going to passively give everyone regen. And it's everyone, by the way. All 10 members are going to get passive regen pulses from you. But if you activate the second one for Infused Light, for the next 3 seconds, you're invulnerable because it converts all incoming damage to healing. So this guy doesn't actually need additional support. The Herald also has a lot of traits that if let's say he was really worried and he really wants to, increase his amount of tankiness, no problem. He can drop his DPS just a little bit, switch out to Retribution. Steadfast Rejuvenation is going to give him healing for every second, for every upkeep point in use. Takes reduced damage while he has Vigor, 15%. Mouse over this one, deal increased damage to weakened foes. All of this stuff makes you even tankier. All of this. you are now tanky. Drop this just straight down to hardening persistence. You now have a damage reduction per upkeep pip. So your damage reduction just stacks, and then you're just passively healing every second that you're in there. You want additional barrier? No problem. Swap over to Salvation. Periodically gain barrier for every unique boon you have. Now, since you are giving yourself, at a minimum, you're giving yourself 5 boons, you're passively going to be getting 239 barrier every 3 seconds. That's ridiculous. This guy can solo tank everything, and I have solo tanked everything. Now, I'm telling you, you don't actually need all those extra things. You don't really need to worry. You can run this exactly as it is with no change and still could do significant damage to all your bosses. You're still going to be hitting about 20k, but you're still an effective tank. That is why I think that the Herald is my preferred go-to tank. Now, there's one other caveat that you're going to be running, and you're going to run into this a lot, and they're actually right. Whenever you look at the Snow Crow's build, even though it's listed here, your Boon Herald is not very popular. And there's a reason. The Boon Herald provides all of these incredible buffs. He makes everybody a little bit better. But the Boon Herald is usually more powerful on groups that are weaker overall, less experienced. Why? Well, if you look at the Gorseval log that I'm going to pull up, he was running Boon Herald. Take a look at your statistics and your buffs. Your buffs are much higher when you're running your Boon Herald. Everyone's quickness gets extended, so even if you don't have as much boon duration, it's going to be that much more powerful. Here you're getting actually wasted stats. If you mouse over it, it's being extended by another 6.4%. It's being wasted. You have so much alacrity. Everyone is permanent alacrity, permanent protection. So look at the protection that he grants. Look at your fury duration that he grants. He is providing everyone with all these extra boons, so they are fat stacked. If you take a look at your combat replay and the details, at no point in time is anyone not have 25 stacks of might, fury, quickness, alacrity. Fuck it, even stability gets extended, right? Everything gets extended when it comes to this. This is an excellent buff for any weaker team. Teams that don't have the godlike DPS that can immediately burst down bosses, because quickness and alacrity, while they're incredibly powerful, they really only need to have them there while you're bursting, during your actual phases. So the problem with the Herald is that he's more of a life-stealing tank, more of a life-stealing type DPS player. He's a steady overtime damage, and his damage, you can actually see it in the video that I posted. It's a very steady damage. It doesn't burst. It doesn't burst as high as the Dragon Hunters. It doesn't burst as high as your power Soul Beasts. It's not going to be a burst type class. Now, a lot of fights they move with a little bit more of an aggressive composition. When you look at these Snow Crow's benchmarks, that's what they are. They're benchmarks. They're things that you should try to go if you want to do as much damage as possible, as quickly as possible, and if you want to try to burst these bosses down before they actually do the other mechanics. Now, while there is something to be said with going aggressive, I would say there's also something to be said for going safe. If you want to try to get your safe clears from wings 1 through 4, or moving, I'll put another one up for the other bosses because you have other specific roles that are needed for the Path of Fire raids. I would say you will have a safer bet with giving yourself every advantage you can. So an ideal setup that I would want to run would actually be to have the Herald be tanking, a heal Necro, the 2 power Seize the Moment Chronomancers, a Druid for the Druid Spirits, and then 2 Condi Renegades that are splitting Righteous Rebel, because the 2 Condi Renegades have an amazing potential for damage. That potential for damage is really what you're going to be banking on. You want your total DPS to be higher. You want to keep as few people as possible doing this type of damage. You understand that your Druid and your Healbrand, which is also tanking, right, is going to be doing almost next to no damage. Everyone understands that. But if you can make that third one with that Plague Doctor's Necro also be doing about 15k damage, your overall damage is going to be that much higher, and it's still going to be that much faster while bringing all the safety and benefits that your Heal Necro provides, as well as the tanking mechanic which you have with your Blind's Thrall. In short, there is an infinite amount of options when it comes to tanking. There's an infinite amount of variety that you can use when it comes to these bosses. It's all about how you approach it and how your strategy is. Hopefully, this helps someone and encourages somebody to tank. I've seen people tank on Thieves. I've seen people tank on their Druids. You can tank on literally any character that has more toughness and has a large or easy access to blocks or invulnerabilities. If you have access to these things, you can use it to tank, you can use it to block, you can use it to position your boss, and you can get yourself your kills. So branch out, find something that works for you. What I recommended, again, is heavily tainted by what I consider to be my own opinion. take it as you will, take it with a grain of salt, but you'll find that your clears are very consistent. You'll clear 1 through 4 quickly the first try if you go just a little bit safe while also having just enough damage for all of it. Hope to see you guys all in the Rift.